Welcome to part A of today's lesson based on the issues surrounding the meltdown currently being experienced around the world due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Pastor James Richards of New Horizons Missions, and I do welcome you to this week's Bible-based teaching. Other than the Black Death plague that started in 1340, no other disease has hit the world and caused so much death, financial losses, and suffering as the COVID-19 pandemic. No one except a few Chinese doctors had heard about it in December 2019, but this plague escaped out of China and in just 6 months has caused havoc in just about every country in the world. Here's a summary of just some of the results of this worldwide pandemic. Trillions of dollars have been lost worldwide. Hundreds of millions of families have lost their jobs throughout the world. Countless millions are now starving, especially in the third world countries. Millions more have been pushed back into poverty. The oil market collapsed as people weren't driving their cars. Theaters, sports, cinemas, and annual events have all been closed down. Suicides and drug overdoses have skyrocketed since the start of this year. And mental cases have increased as many are unable to cope with the new pressures, uncertainty, and unhappiness caused by this virus. Countries such as the USA have gone deep into debt and borrowed trillions of dollars to stay afloat. Colleges and schools have all closed, so now hundreds of millions of kids worldwide are not being educated. Hospitals are overwhelmed with COVID-19 and cannot do their normal treatments and surgeries, so that millions of untreated patients are going to die from heart disease, cancer, or other treatable illnesses. Millions of small businesses have closed down forever. Bars, restaurants, gyms, and hairdressers have been forced to close. And most churches are closed by government decree, and some may not even reopen as donations are way down and members are drifting away or watching a church service on TV. Even our third world missions have been impacted as we did not receive the financial support that we did last year. It's dramatically down due to the myriad of problems caused by the coronavirus. So let's ask the question that millions are asking right now. Rich and poor, laborers or business people, pastors and congregants, politicians and voters, they're all asking this question: where is God during this coronavirus pandemic? Where is God? I'm sure that you've heard that question or maybe even asked that question. I think it's fair to say that just about everyone is suffering in some way because of this virus. There are exceptions. Forbes magazine describes how Jeff Bezos increased his wealth by 25 billion, with a B, because everyone is going online to purchase what they need from Amazon. That's not his fault, of course, but he's a recipient of a tremendous amount of additional wealth. But most are suffering in some way. Here are a few examples. For some, there are no food in the house, no jobs to go to. They can't pay their rent or their mortgage. Their loss of a loved one due to the virus. Children can't go to school. No church to attend. Stuck at home and unable to mix with friends and family. The list goes on and on. Even China, who started it all, is suffering. They are now locked in a life or death struggle with many countries. The USA is pulling billions of dollars worth of imports from them, and the whole world is cautious and suspicious of China now. Very few are thriving because of this plague. Are you? Are you thriving? So let's ask the question that millions are now asking again. Where is God during this coronavirus pandemic? What's happening right now can be summed up in one word: suffering. Suffering. We may not have the power to stop the coronavirus, but we can deal with the suffering it brings with it. Here's the answer to the question, where is God during this coronavirus pandemic? God didn't cause the pandemic, but he's standing by to assist those suffering in any way he can. 1 Peter chapter 4 tells us that everyone has to deal with suffering in any way, and so during their lifetime, some more than others, of course. But right now, just about everyone is suffering because of the coronavirus pandemic. But God tells us how to have the attitude that will turn these disasters into a blessing. Are you ready? Let me read to you from 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12, 13, and 19. Now, this is God speaking through Peter. Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you are going through, as if something strange were happening to you. Instead, be very glad, for these trials make you partners with Christ in his suffering, so that you will have the wonderful joy of seeing his glory when it is revealed to the whole world. Just want to finish that verse. So if you are suffering in a manner that pleases God, keep on doing what is right and trust your lives to the God who created you, for he will never fail you. So our question, where is God during this coronavirus pandemic, is very difficult to answer. But today we're going to explain to you how Christians can understand and have peace about the unfairness of life and the pain that is inflicted on both them and others who don't seem to deserve it during this pandemic. These answers will help you get through the suffering we have to all deal with during this difficult time. Now, this lesson is broken into 4 parts. Now, here's the first part, is to identify exactly what our question is. Oh, that's interesting. Let us change today's question to what it doesn't say, but implies. Why does God allow good people to suffer during this coronavirus pandemic? That's what we're really saying. After all, isn't he in control of the universe? Doesn't the doctrine of providence say that nothing happens without God's permission? Isn't he totally powerful and all-knowing? Couldn't he just stop it? Are you asking where God is during the coronavirus plague that has swept the world? Christians say, this is what Christians say: how could God allow this to happen to me, my loved ones, the church, and the nation I love? Unbelievers rephrase the question like this: if there is a loving God, then how could he allow this plague to happen to innocent people? Isn't he supposed to be a God of love? Have you heard that before? So whether it's the COVID-19 pandemic, the 9/11 attack on New York, the Holocaust, the persecution of Christians all around the world, or even close to home, a loved one being diagnosed with cancer or even with the COVID-19, or your financial problems, or your deteriorating family matters, the real question is always the same, and here it is: Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Now, the second point that I want to raise is to identify who are these good people that God is allowing bad things to happen to. You with me? The Bible, which is our only authority, tells us clearly in Romans 3:10, no one is righteous, not even one. No one does good, not a single one. So according to many passages in the Bible, nobody is good. When Jesus was called good by the rich young ruler, you remember that, don't you? He replied that no one is good except God in heaven. It's true that if we measure ourselves up against Stalin or Adolf Hitler or any of the other evil monsters the world has spawned, yes, we would be considered good against that person. But up against God? Now, when the very righteous man of God, the prophet Isaiah, he saw himself up against the perfectly holy God, what did he do? Do you remember? This is in Isaiah 6. He didn't just say, wow, you look holy and I look holy too. No, he fell to the floor in self-loathing, shouting out, oh no, I will be destroyed. I am not pure and I live among people who are not pure. So he recognized immediately who he was and that he was not a good person. So Isaiah was not one of those good people, was he? In fact, no one is. The truth is that God owes us nothing. Yet God, through his amazing compassion and love, does promise to look after us, to ease our burdens, to rescue us from disaster, and to heal us. So when we talk about good people in this question, we are talking about those who are evil compared to God's holiness. And yes, that includes you and me. And when he does save and protect us sinners, it's not deserved. We don't deserve it, which is why it's called grace. Now, this is the end of part 1 of our lesson on where is God during this COVID-19 pandemic. Make sure you listen to part B, which will enable you to find out how you can turn this disaster into a blessing. So thank you very much for listening.
Very good.